Welcome to my talk today. Thank you so much for watching this talk. Today, I want to talk more about how you can find out how others are playing your games. For a little bit of context, my name is Johanna Pirker. I'm a professor for games research and game development at Graz University of Technology. I'm a computer scientist, and I'm always really excited to bridge together concepts of computer science, such as data analysis, AI, HCI, virtuality, with game design and game development techniques. And one topic which is really close to my heart is the topic of data analysis in games, which is also one of my major research fields. So today I want to talk about how data is shaping our games and tell a little bit about different techniques which you can apply to also conduct data analysis for your games. Just for a little bit of a motivation, I think especially due to the pandemic, we've also seen how important the games industry is, not only for us as gamers and game developers, but also for the broader society. More people started video games. There has been more research with data on video games. For instance, there was a lovely paper from Oxford showing actually positive benefits for our mental health when playing a video game such as Animal Crossing. We can see quite a rise in game-related platforms such as Twitch, and yeah, it's a really exciting field to be in. But let me start with data analysis, especially big data analysis. Before we start talking about data, we sort of also need to define what is big data, right? Are we talking about hundreds of data sets? Are we talking about millions of data sets? And just a little bit of a spoiler, I really love this definition of data science, big data science, which is big data is anything which is crashing Excel. Okay, okay, I think we can work with that as starting base. So the sort of data analysis we do is usually really we look into often millions of user data of interactions, but also if you're now wondering, hey, I have a small game, I'm an indie developer, but I still want to make sense of out of data, this still absolutely works. So we will talk about specific techniques here. What can you do with data analytics? Typical things which you might know from very very general other fields: market optimization, data exploration, social network, and relationship analysis, which is a little bit my main field, identifying influencers, for instance, fraud detection, and machine generated data analytics. If we apply this to games, we can think in the field of market optimization. This are typical topics such as monetization optimization. Data exploration would be identifying new markets, for instance. Social network analysis would be also understanding better how players are playing with each other or against each other in multiplayer setups. Fraud detection to identify cheaters early, and machine generated data analytics. Um, a big spoiler ahead, I'm very interested in the positive impacts of data analytics for our society. So, what me and my research group, I'm the leader of a 14 team research group called the Game Lab Graz. We are not doing things like monetization optimization. We are mainly interested in identifying interesting patterns, making games more enjoyable, playable, identifying problems, or understanding the general ideas how the games are, I don't know, game environments are reflecting our society. Just as a little bit of a spoiler ahead, if you were hoping for the marketing tips 101, that's wrong talk for that. Um, and I would like to start already with a little bit of a constant challenge. When we talk about data analytics, I'm so often like confronted with this conflict. On the one hand, you have a game designer who has a really strong idea about the game idea, about the strong story. And of course, as a game designer, you want the player to understand the game from their perspective, right? But on the other hand, you have this idea of the player who wants to have this freedom of exploration. And especially one thing which I want to point out often is just happy if they can play the game. Because what I want to point out, data analytics does not mean necessarily that we only focus on trying to adapt the game really based on just the player's needs, but sometimes rather to understand better how players are playing the game and supporting them to play the game like they were supposed to play the game. So, for instance, finding traps, finding bugs, finding areas which are just not accessible or like too difficult, and really in the end bring together this idea of having the game designer's concepts, that the player is able to see and explore all those concepts in the best way possible. And yeah, so we also need to understand this concept of, okay, there will be always also the main idea that you want to make revenue with the game and eventually optimize the game. Those are in general possibilities where you can apply data analytics to, but we are not interested in. So the key question I would suggest to look at when working with data analytics, that we do not focus so much on, I want to optimize the game so that I can make most money out of the game. I would not recommend focusing on that, but rather to naturally using data analytics to improve the player's experience and make them being able to play the game and in general and in the best enjoyable engaging way possible, because then the players will naturally come play your game and hopefully buy your game. So typical question I am super excited in, for instance, if we look at this this idea, I think I've seen this first in slides from Graham McAllister, who gives really fantastic talks on game usability, by the way. But first of all, if you start a game, you need to start with, do you understand how the game is played, like the controls? So if I press the A button, will the game start, will I be able to jump? And then the mechanics. Mechanics would be, okay, I need to jump in order to jump onto the mushroom's head to get rid of this mushroom. And only after the player understood how to play the game, so first of all, okay, what are like the main controls? A for jumping, B for dashing, for instance. And then the mechanics. Okay, I need to get rid of the mushrooms by jumping on their heads. I could also dash them. And after this learning experience, the player first can tell you or not if they had a good experience at all. This is like this first experience. And then if they can tell you, was it engaging, was it enjoyable? If yes, they continue playing your game. And you have this extended experience, you can get more detailed feedback. If not, yeah, you might do some rework. So key questions we want to understand: does the player understand how to play the game? Can they play the game? How do they play the game? And yeah, can the game experience and the tutorial experience, for instance, be somehow optimized that more players are able to play the game? This is not so much about making it easy or making it super hard. I don't want to go into any Souls or Elden Ring discussions. This is way out of topic. It's really this idea about, can they play the game? Are the controls clear? Is it playable? Are there any lost areas? So when data analytics meets games, our first goal is really to understand the player behavior, to understand better, more inclusive, or maybe more innovative, maybe also more social game experiences. So we can use data to understand and identify patterns in game data, understand who is the player, looking at some statistics on player behavior, for instance, retention rate or how often are they returning. And then on the one other hand, we have the social behavior. So one idea would be really focusing on the player itself. The other player would be focusing on the interaction with other players. The social play behavior from players. How do we interact with others? How are friendships built? How we can recommend good groups in a social game? Does the game change us somehow, and so on and so forth. So again, on the one hand, it would be really learning more about players, learn more about the games, but eventually we can also use this to learn more about us. So again, I really love this small little gif. So for instance, what we can see here, this is pretty much summing up what I just said. We created a lovely experience, in this case this wheel, and I, as a designer, I had a clear imagination how they're supposed to play our game. Meh, this is not how this game this guy wants to play that, but this guy is still enjoying the our tool, isn't it? So is this good or is this bad? So what do we want to learn from the players? To understand better what data we need to collect, we really need to understand what we want to learn. And this would be the behavioral patterns. What are players doing while playing the game? Just think of a game like GTA. Are they driving constantly with the car? Are they rather interacting with other players? Are they just there for the monster stunts and trying to collect everything? We want to know about their understanding, what the players actually think, what they have to do or what they have done. So if they understand our goals as game designers, the engagement, what keeps them playing, how can we keep them playing, then the entire experience, like what is their current experience, what are their emotions, how do they feel, are they having fun, are they becoming sad, and so on and so forth. And then the social experience, the social behavior of players. A keyword here is the recommender systems. And for those points, I would like to introduce two main concepts. The first one is called behavior profiling. There I will talk about techniques such as clustering. And the second one, for everything for social experiences, I want to introduce social network analysis, which is using graph applications to make sense of the connection of players. So let's talk about behavior profiling. Many of you might be aware of this concept of the bottled gamer types. This is it's a very simple concept, and there are way more sophisticated concepts out there showing more player types, but I still like to come back to this one because this is so simple and explains this concept that we are all playing games differently very nicely. So Bartel looked at multi-user dungeons. I'm pretty sure that many of you are aware of these player types, and he identified that players do have different behaviors when interacting with other players or the world. And he identified players who play very competitive, who are engaged by having better weapons, being in a better ranking than other players, identified them as killers who are acting on other players. Those who love interacting with other players, he identified as socializers. So players who do love interacting with others, forming groups, fighting enemies together. Then there are the players who love acting on the world. Those are called achievers. Those who do have a lot of fun when collecting all different mushrooms, finding all monster stunts, achieving something, getting maybe small little badges or achievements for everything they do. And then explorers, those who are just engaged by like looking through the environment, eventually finding a hidden task, and so on and so forth. And every one of us plays differently, but the important thing is we are most of the time also not only one player type, but for instance, for me, I'm definitely an achiever at some days, probably also a killer, very rarely a socializer, and sometimes an explorer. So this is also something which is dependent on my mood, also on the game. It's not like for every game I'm the same player type. I do have also different patterns how I play in different games. So for instance, I love to call this like the player habit or the player fingerprint. Maybe the player DNA would be a little bit too much sometimes, because again, this is something which might change over time or dependent on the games. And what you can see here, for instance, say we have, just imagine like you have a game where you have a story mode, a campaign, an arena, an online multiplayer, and a local multiplayer mode. And now you can log the data, how the players are playing, what parts of the games they are playing. And you can identify, for instance, with typical cluster analysis. This would be, we use most of the times archetypal analysis. You could also apply k-means. It would be applying machine learning based clustering algorithms. And you can identify then different patterns, clusters based on their behavior. So you would identify a group of players who do have a tendency to play a lot of story. So here, for instance, this is a story mode. Those are the players who are not really interested at all at any multiplayer sections of the games, but they do enjoy the stories. Then you have, for instance, the party player. This is the one who loves the local multiplayer, barely plays any other modes, eventually a little bit of stories to finish the next achievements for the split screen, but nothing else. So you can identify different players, and they might be those player groups and then are a little bit similar. It could be, if you just imagine you looked at 100 players and their interactions, that 2 of those players are the story enjoyers, 80 of them are all-rounders, and then the others are somehow mixed. So it doesn't tell you anything about how many people are within a group, but this is general how you can split or cluster your players into groups. And then from there you can go crazy and make interesting new analysis. For instance, hey, you notice that the story enjoyers are all dropping out at level 3. Why is that? Maybe because they do not have any features interesting enough as story enjoyer to keep them playing. So maybe as a game designer you can introduce something. This is an example from a research team where they looked at Forza and looked at 1.2 million player data, 120 million race data in Forza actually, and they also did a similar clustering, just to give you an overview how this can look like in real life data. The next typical concept we know in game design would be this flow experience. This is always like typical game design concept. Again, game design 101, very, very simple concept, that your game, the current level, the current quest should be always fitting the current skill level of the player. So the challenge the game gives you should match the skill level of the player. This is this flow concept by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So the more advanced the players get, the more challenging, of course, should be also the next quests they're giving. And because otherwise, if they are already like super experienced and you do not give them a challenge at all, they're bored and will drop out. Whereas if they do not have a skill at all, like Skyrim, you have this small little stick and there's come this giant dragon, you might drop out because you are like overly scared to continue playing the game. And this is like also an interesting concept to look at player data to eventually look a little bit into how this changes within your game. I want to give you one data from one data example from our research. We looked at data from Just Cause 2. So this is a data set which was back then provided by Square Enix. And we looked at the player histories from over 5,000 Just Cause 2 players. They were 2010-ish. And we looked at metrics within the game, such as total kills, total chaos. For those of you who do not know, Just Cause 2 is a game a little bit similar like GTA. You can drive different vehicles. You try to make chaos and save the world. And yeah, And so we looked at different features to give you a little bit of an overview how this looks like. So those are the features, total play time. So for every single player, those were the features we're interested in. How long were they playing in the mission? How much chaos would they make? And what is the kill death ratio, which is always like a good number if you're interested in the the skill level of the player. The kills per minute, deaths per minute, was interesting, and so on and so forth. Kilometers driven, eventually, how likely, like how much fun do they have driving different vehicles, locations discovered, interesting idea if you want to get into finding out how much they like exploration. And this is how such an analysis would look like then. So we would look at the progress along all the missions, and you can already see here, for instance, apparently level 3 is one which is like, or mission 3, which is a little bit full of action. In level 6, for instance, you have to drive a lot. And yeah, and by applying archetypal analysis, we identified, I think it's 8 different archetypes, clusters, basically. The average players, drivers who really love driving, low performers who have the worst kill-death ratio and the most deaths per minute, versus the elite players, for instance, they play the highest difficult level and have the highest kill-death ratio, and so on and so forth. So, and what we can see, we did this analysis over every single mission, and then we looked closer. Are all the players engaged nicely per mission? So for instance, in the progress, we can identify a very interesting behavior of the elite players in terms of progress, starting with mission 3. Whereas for the kill-death ratio, you can certainly see that the elite players here do have quite high values, especially in mission 3 and 4. And just as an idea, what you can also see, like it drops a lot in level 6. As a game designer, this is the point where you could ask yourself, did I provide enough fun elements or engaging elements for these player types also in this specific level, or is there like a small tweak how I can adjust my game to make this eventually more interesting? To analyze this data visually, we also developed the Sankey diagram, where you can actually see, hey, we have those different player types, and eventually they're changing their behavior from mission to mission. And when are they actually dropping out? So just as a like idea, we have this low performers, which are also like in many other games, low performers eventually are frustrated or not engaged enough and might drop out easily. And here you can really look at the single players who dropped out and who not. But you can also see some of the low performers became rushers from mission 2 to mission 3. So someone who just wants to finish the game but is not so interested in exploring everything. So did you provide enough features for them to be able to also like go through some of the missions more quickly? Those are questions again for you as a game designer to ask yourself. For the last part of my talk, I would like to quickly describe the social network analysis in games. This is a concept which is out there already for so many years, and it's coming from graph theory. And Stanley Milgram, who might be a name to many of you, he conducted like several like psychological experiments, including the one called the 6 degrees of separations. And he was based in Boston, I think in Harvard back then, and he was interested in how well are people connected in the US all over the places. So what he did, he sent packages to different people, random people all around the US, and told them, hey, there's one lawyer in Boston, please send him this package, but not directly to him, but send it to someone who you know, who you think might know this one in person. So What he did, he sent this package to a random person in Kansas and told them, hey, there's this lawyer called blah 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 in Boston, and please try to send him this package through people you might think would know him. So what this person in Kansas does, he thinks, hey, I don't know this lawyer, but I do know another lawyer who might know him in Iowa. So I'm gonna send him this package. This lawyer in Iowa thought, oh, I don't know any other lawyer, so I'm just gonna send it to Indiana because it's just like closer to Boston. And what he found that in average, when the package got delivered, so there were some which never found their way, that in average it was 5.5, the average distance between the people. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here 6. So the average degree was around 5.5 if you calculate all the sent packages. This study was repeated quite often. In 2008, for instance, Microsoft did a similar study with MSN users and found the average connection between all users was 6.6. It would be also the same, like if I ask myself, okay, what is my handshake connection to Obama? So do I know someone who might know someone who might know Obama? Then my handshake connection would be 3. In Facebook, the average connection was 3.5. It's also called the Kevin Bacon number. So everyone who played in a movie together with Kevin Bacon has a big number of 1. And just to give you a little bit of idea what this looks like, I still propose that we need something like this in game development too. This could be the karmic number. So if someone developed a game with karmic, it's the karmic number 1 and so on and so forth. It could be the Romero number, but it's just not fair to find a good number name. So I would keep it really neutral and would go propose the Pirker number. To see what is a good connection to other game. Just kidding. But just to give you a little bit of an idea what social network analysis is and how this works. And now going back to player networks. If we think of games now, so if 2 players in a multiplayer games did play against or with each other, we can build a line between them. We call this, for instance, this is a typical network based on graphs. Player A and player B played with each other. This is not directed. If we know, for instance, that player B did follow player C, but player C did never follow back, then it would be a directed network when we do have directed links. When we know, for instance, hey, player A and player B, they have already played 3 matches together, we can also build a weighted network. So this is a typical player network where the vertices are the players and the links and the edges are actually how many matches did they play with each other. And to finalize, we used this method, for instance, to analyze the game Destiny, open online shooter, and we were interested in if players are playing better, if they are often playing with the same people, or if they're getting better if they play with strangers. What is the retention? What are important nodes? What are potential influencers, and so on and so forth. So this would be a typical data analysis you can do. So I would always recommend that that this is a method which is super powerful and can have a big impact not only on identifying more about the players but also find more about us. So what I already mentioned earlier, this example of Animal Crossing, where they used also data analysis to find out more about our mental health. And last but not least, I really want to point out that you need to be careful with those techniques. So this was just like a starting point to give you some ideas what data analysis actually can do, but there are plenty of concerns which we cannot cover in this talk anymore, but things like correlations, wrong correlations, and especially a not nice ethical use of data analytics. So for instance, you need to be careful what you're celebrating without having a bigger context on the topic. So thank you so much for listening to this talk. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Bye.